Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm going to call the
Morning.
meeting of Del Mar College Audit Committee to order. First item is a quorum call. Chairwoman Scott, has Carol joined us yet?
I'm texting
Regent
her.
Bennett? Regent Bennett?
I'm here.
Okay. Rudy Garza, I'm here. And then we've got staff members joining us, Dr. Escamilla, Counselor Olga Rivera, Mr. Raul Garcia, Tammy McDonald, and Natalie Villarreal. Anybody else with us this morning that I didn't mention? We do have a quorum with 2 members of the committee. We're a total of 3. At this time, we're going to have a quick moment of silence. Thank you. Regent Bennett, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I sure will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
United
America,
States and to the republic for which
to
it
the
stands,
republic for which it stands, under one nation, under God,
God, indivisible.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's true. Thank you. And then we're supposed to read the Del Mar College vision statement. Del Mar College will be the premier choice for life-changing educational opportunities provided by responsive, innovative faculty and staff who empower students to improve local and global communities. Good morning, Chairwoman Scott. Thank you for joining us. We are now full, the committee is now complete. We've already gone through the quorum call, the moment of silence, and the Pledge of Allegiance, and we just read the Del Mar College vision statement. Okay, do we have any public comments this morning? I know we posted the agenda, correct? And we
That's
haven't
correct.
received any, no
That's
public
correct.
comments received by anyone? Okay, great.
No public comments, no one logging in. I do, let me ask, there is Regent got there's a public call-in box that I see. I'm not sure what that is. Do we always have that?
Okay,
We do.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you.
and we don't have anybody on, correct, Sarah?
No, we don't.
All right, perfect. All right, we've got an agenda. The items for discussion this morning and possible action is basically an organizational discussion. I guess we're supposed to meet, according to the charter, we're supposed to meet once every 3 months or once a quarter. And so we're going to begin our work. We've introduced the committee members, first off in the quorum call, which is Chair Scott, Regent Bennett, and myself, Rudy Garza. And so those are 3 committee members. I'll be acting in the interim time as your chair, at least to which point Regent Bennett feels his responsibilities will allow him to be able to take over. And I've got no issues at all with relinquishing my current role. If we could have a quick review of the committee the committee charter, so that we'll know exactly what it is that we're supposed to be doing and what we can and can't do. Augie, can I ask you to read the charter, please? Has everybody read it already?
Yes, sir. I've read it.
I have to. How about Regent Bennett? Have you read the charter, sir? For the
I
committee?
have.
Okay. All right, great. So we'll dispense on reading that. Next item I see on the agenda is a overview of the college audit functions and calendar, beginning with the IT, which is, I think, our most pressing issue, our internal audit, which we were briefed on yesterday, and then our external audit, so we'll know how to create a calendar for the activities that we need to engage in as our committee responsibilities. Is that something, Tammy or Mark, could you give us an overview?
So, Regent Garza, based on our orientation meeting
Right.
around the committee, those were the priorities that were set forth to analyze and or discuss by way of this committee. Ms. McDonald, do you have anything further to add?
No, sir. It was the way that, we handled the assessment and what were the priorities of the college at that time. And so we're continuing to work off of those priorities that were previously set.
Okay.
Do you want the, on the internal side, because we're talking about IT, correct?
Well, in looking at or going over the internal audit report yesterday, I kind of see that a lot of the things that we would need to be working on kind of dovetail into each other. If you look at 2021's internal audit plan status, there were some items in there that had high priority, including information technology. And I saw some of those in updating our risk assessment.
Yes,
So,
sir. Yeah.
I guess the question that I've got right now, so we at least can get a basis for moving forward, is we have not been, at least in the time that I've been on the board, we have not had an active audit committee. How long has it been since we've had an audit committee that's been active in actually giving direction for some of these internal and external audits, and possibly?
I'll answer that for you, Rudy. So the board decided via conversation, gosh, probably for the last 10 years, maybe longer, at least as long as I've been on the board. And I think prior to that, there was a discussion on a regular basis about whether or not the board wanted to act as a committee of the whole or break into individual committees. And so for almost a decade, and probably longer, the board had determined to act as a committee of the whole. And so there were not any individual committees that were assigned. That was part of the catalyst for the review of our bylaws and the structure in our bylaws, to state that by resolution, the board would make a form, as opposed to just discussion, there would be a formal resolution every biennium when the board reorganizes itself to reaffirm what committee structure they want in place. So this is the first time that an audit committee has met in probably over a dozen years, because the board as a whole decided that they did want a separate audit committee.
Okay. All right.
And sir, back to your question on, what was presented yesterday of the status. We started about 5.5 years ago is when we started the internal audits, and it was outsourced to, at the time it was Weaver. And then again, we just renewed, their contract again for internal audit functions. It showed 6 areas, functional areas of the college that have, we've undertaken an auditing for the last 5 years. And 4 of those 6 areas have been completed, and those audits are closed out now. So your grant management, your human resource, student services, and purchasing, those audits have all been closed now. So there will be no follow-ups or revisits planned right now for those areas. We have 2 areas that are still open, which is admissions and registrar, and then IT general controls. And of those two areas, I believe that there is in each area one finding that still remains partially remediated for each area. So they're close to completion, but we hadn't quite gotten there on those two areas. And so we took the risk ranking of the high areas when we did the initial assessment 5 years ago. And those were the areas that were presented to the board. It was the plan that these are the areas that are high risk and that we need to work on first. And the board agreed and have been approving the plans every year as we move forward. As was mentioned yesterday, we are working on scheduling with staff, with Dr. Escamilla's team, to have a refresh of our risk assessment to see if anything moves around on the risk rating.
Okay,
Regent Garza, can I step in here for a moment?
absolutely, Regent Bennett, sure.
We've had this internal audit, the CPA firm doing the internal audits for several years. And prior to that, there was no internal audit function going way back. But now what they've done is a lot of compliance audit. They're checking the compliance of us to our internal controls, us to our policies to see if we comply with them. As we saw yesterday, some things are complied with and some things aren't even close to being complied with. But they spent 5+ years doing compliance audits, and they've done a wonderful job. I think their work is impeccable. But my concern from a long time ago, based on 40 years of experience, is exposure audits. So in IT, we've had some changes recently, including the turnover, including the conversion that exposes us. During times of high level turnover, during times of conversion, we have a lot of exposure. Can we lose data? Yeah, we can lose data. Can we shut down completely? Sure we can. But we need somebody to come in and check that. I know we've got a third-party firm that we're paying, but that's not an internal audit firm. The internal auditors report directly to the board. That consulting firm reports to management. We need the internal auditors, in my opinion, and based on 40 years of experience, my opinion is we've got to look at the exposure areas in IT, in contracts. We've got exposure in contracts. And hey, I've got a couple of resources that I use. This is a report published by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. When you have contracts, you have exposure. 5% of all revenue is lost through fraud. This is my concern. So I think that's one of the areas that we really need to focus on as an internal audit committee. That's my opinion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Yes, Dr. Smith.
I fully support and understand what Mr. Bennett is saying. And we have a group called the Columbia Advisory Group that we carved out while Weaver was doing the compliance piece for operations and so forth. The Columbia Advisory Group is a major organization that is checking the IT nuts and bolts, if you will, of our operations, and has been working with us. I'll be glad to. I think I hear what Regent Bennett is talking about. You know, how do we raise that bar and go bring it to the next level? Am I hearing you right, Mr. Bennett? Is that accurate?
Actually, the Columbia Advisory Group serves a different purpose than internal auditors. And I don't know much about them. I think they're an organization of about 200 people, a niche firm, probably do good work. I don't know anything about them, but the internal auditors have a completely different function.
Yes, and so how do we link those two processes so that there's a full compliance and so that it does come into our internal audit function is the question that or the scenario that I'm kind of thinking out in response to your suggestions here, recommendations rather. And so I think the first step is to understand exactly who Columbia Advisory Group is, kind of a refresh on that for our newer regions, and then talk about who they are, what they're doing for the college, what they've been doing, and how we move ahead in order to accomplish what is being suggested. Because we agree, we absolutely understand and want to make sure that those pieces are checked, those boxes are checked. At the same time, we continue to work with them on a regular basis. And yes, we do have a lot of transition that is happening suddenly in the way of HR, the stressors and everything else. And I'm working overnight, even, I mean, through the evenings and through to make sure that we don't miss a beat, and that the exposure is minimized to the degree that we possibly can. So those are just my suggestions on the IT piece, so that we understand where we are, who we're dealing with, and those kinds of things first, I think.
And I think that the internal auditors can make a decision as to how much work that Columbia Advisory Group has done that they can rely on. And that's normally what internal auditors do. If there's an outside firm, they say, can I rely on any of their work? Can I rely on all of it to replace some of my work? That's a decision that the internal auditors would need to make.
So let me ask this question. So if because I'm not an expert in the field, and I'm trying to understand the terminology. So Ed, are you suggesting that both in internal and IT, that those audits could be expanded to audit exposure and not just compliance? Is that something that could happen within those existing relationships, or are you suggesting that there needs to be a third audit firm engaged to look at exposure?
No, Weaver is the ones that will address the exposure, and they are extremely well qualified.
Okay.
Impeccable work.
Okay, so it could be that in their and I don't recall the scope of their contract, but could there be a scope addition, or could there be some change to their charge going forward that would include some exposure audit, or just maybe just talk about that language, both for IT and for the internal audit, how we incorporate that scope of work into what they're doing?
I think we have to expand. I think we have to expand their contract, because they had their hands full with compliance because it hadn't been done for years. And they've done a lot of work on it and good results. But now I think that they need to look at the exposure. We need them to look at the exposure to satisfy us that we are not overly exposed. We're always going to be exposed, but I don't want to be overly exposed. And I want to do my fiduciary responsibility and have it covered.
This is Tammy. May I make a comment, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Tammy, go ahead.
Thank you. Our new risk assessment that we will be conducting soon will also bring forward new areas of what is considered high risk to present to the board to recommend to implement into a new audit plan. So as Dan was talking about yesterday, so that's in play already. Also, our scope of work or what we have with Weaver is when we conduct the risk assessments and then it's a recommendation is provided to the board, an audit plan, it includes anything that is considered high risk. So if that's an area of high risk, then we don't have to go back and change the scope of work, because the scope of work is tied to the risk assessment and any type of internal audit work that the college asks them to conduct. So I'll let General Counsel take another look at it. But as far as that, it does say that we will perform the risk assessment and we will use it as a guide to identify areas of high risk to moderate to lower. And then it's presented to the board to finalize an audit plan.
Yeah. So this is Raul. Mr. Garza, is it okay if I make a few comments myself?
Absolutely, sure.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm trying to learn.
Everybody,
listen to everybody.
Here. Okay. Everybody's making some very good points here. And so I think Mr. Bennett did touch on a couple of things. IT is doing a certain aspect of auditing some risk and exposures that we may have, and so is Weaver. And so right now is the optimal time to make sure that there is some level of cohesiveness so that no one organization has an assumption that, oh, they're going to cover it. Oh, no, that firm's going to cover it. There really needs to be some coordination because, at a certain point in time, IT transitioned into a manual process where there's the whole compliance risk procedural that comes into play where Weaver really needs to take that handoff and run with it. So, now that we have these two firms together, and now we're at a pivotal point where there's a risk assessment being performed by Weaver, we can start those conversations or help bridge those two pathways of risk assessment and auditing. And then the other thing is, we talked about compliance, we talked about IT, and then there's a third aspect of it is the operational efficiencies. There's so many ways that you can spend this whole audit process. I can think of those three itself. And so, yes, we spent 5 years on compliance. And so the question is, do we spend the next 5 years on IT? Or do we do some kind of an appropriate mix where all the risks are assessed and then the top 5 on the IT scale up and then the top 5 from the compliance? Because as you know, our environment changes so quickly, right? That in 5 years, if you're looking to restart another cycle, who knows what exposure you already been dealt with in that 5-year period. We know that. And I say 5 years because we started a risk assessment 5 years ago, and here we are in 2021, just wrapping up and fine tuning those final pieces of that risk assessment. Who knows how long these last two pieces are going to go out, but at least we need to have some kind of cycle where we touch on all the different risks and then come up with a plan, a comprehensive plan, put it that way, of all our risk and exposures, whether it be operational, risk, IT, or something else. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, I agree with your thoughts, Mr. Garcia. First off, I appreciate everybody kind of giving me history. Thank you, Chairwoman Scott and Regent Bennett. I share your concerns. I think that Weaver, as good a firm as they are, and again, no slight or no, I'm not trying to be critical of anything that the college has done or has been doing. I think that the fact that we're operating as an efficient level as we are is a testament to what has been done and what is being done now. But I think that one of the things that I have concerns with is that if we've already done and reviewed all these areas in order to feel that we're in compliance, that the work of the internal audit or external audit or the audit committee has been formed now doesn't end there. It continues in a way of saying every entity has to continue on continuous improvement, keep working on improvement. And what is required today or what's been required yesterday may not even be anywhere near what's going to be required tomorrow or 5 years or 10 years from now. So we have to be open and try to figure out. I think yesterday when we talked about the rebranding of the college and it's in our literature, I think that the biggest compliment was to the process that they used in coming up with the options that were presented to the board. And I think that our work as an audit committee needs to make sure that we adopt or at least present an option to the board of what processes we want to use in order to be able to achieve continuous improvement and to be able to address or be able to address the challenge that we have, the risks that we're going to have related to a software conversion, of which I've been a part of at different entities in my work career and in the places that I've served, and the challenges that we may incur as part of directing or focusing our efforts on trying to make sure that we're nimble enough to be able to function as a college or be able to deliver the product to our students in a pandemic environment. So again, I think that as a committee, we need to come up with a process in which we can say, be more open in determining what we're going to ask, whether it be Weaver, and they've been working with us for 5 years, or another firm going forward, because again, whether it be an external audit consultant or an internal audit consultant, there's a period of time where you've got to look at maybe looking at fresh eyes. And I don't think that right now is that time, but going forward, you still got to figure out how you're going to not just have staff or the administration or the board, but how we're going to put items on a look list for our internal audit to consider in an upcoming plan. Tammy, I'm going to listen.
Yes, thank you, sir. When we started the internal audit, initially we wanted to concentrate on internal controls because there had not been an internal audit function in the college for a time period. So we felt like that was the first step that we did need to take, was to initially concentrate on internal controls. As we move forward with those internal controls assessments and identifying ways for implementing new controls or revising old controls or removing some of them, as we go forward with that process, then in those areas you move into a different phase of auditing, like Mr. Garcia and Regent Bennett were talking about. You move into a different phase in those areas. But we do have, our contract with Weaver is for all internal audit functions when we put it out. So we do have a contract with them that is good for another 5 years from this month, actually. And so it does encompass whatever functions we need them to do. But I think one of the primary things, which I think we're all talking about, is that fresh look of the assessment or the reassessment of the college and the risk and what rises up to the top for high risk, because what we did 5 years ago was a different time. So what might have been considered high risk then could be considered maybe lower now, and then other things will move up to the high risk categories. So I think we're kind of all speaking the same thing. I think it goes back to us completing that assessment, and then this committee, if that's what you decide to do, and then take it to the board and form your plan from using that as a basis.
So if I might clarify, Mr. Garcia, go ahead, and then I want to clarify something. We can't hear you. Your mute's on.
Thank you. Just for clarity, we cannot discount the body of work that Collier, Johnson, and Wood has done. So to Tammy's point, there has been a very detailed, comprehensive assessment of our internal controls that is more of a deeper dive than what Collier, Johnson, and Wood has been performed. And so I need to say this, that the body of work in terms of the internal controls performed by our external auditors, Johnson and Wood, encompasses the internal controls surrounding the federal grants and state grants. That's required by professional guidelines, right? But it's at a very high level. The body of work that Weaver does is really just getting boots on the ground to the detail level and doing a comprehensive study. So to Tammy's point, they've done a wonderful job getting into the details and helping us not only deal with the internal controls, but also improve some business practices. That's wonderful. But at the same time, we also need to point out that from a federal and state compliance, how we manage those dollars, we've had very minimal audit issues, to the extent that I think it helped in getting the accreditation process with zero issues. Just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Ms. Garcia, you and I were on the same track, as I was going to try to clarify, and it might be helpful for us at a future meeting to have a brief overview of the 3 contracts, because we've got Columbia Advisory Group and IT, we've got Weaver doing internal audit, and Collier, Johnson, and Woods doing our external audit. The external audit obviously has general accepted accounting principles on how they have to conduct that external audit. I think it might be helpful for the calendar purposes to really understand where there are critical points at which this committee can provide some input into a scope of work. Could see early drafts of, for example, the risk assessment, could see some detailed findings if there are some confidential or detailed findings that you want the committee to be able to discuss outside of an open full board meeting. So those might be some examples of how both the scope of work for those 3 contractors and the calendars of that work can help inform what we're going to do as a committee.
Yeah, if I may.
Dr. Scamia. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We're I think all thinking, at least I am thinking what is being said, concurring with what's being said. It's the overview that's necessary for the 3 umbrellas. That's basically what this agenda was today, was to discuss how to move ahead. A deep dive, perhaps in a workshop fashion, to have all 3 entities represented to help formulate in some form of a agenda. I think would really help for the 4 newest regions, especially, but actually beyond, because there's a couple of regions that only been on a couple of years that I think it'll benefit everybody as a team, is what I'm saying, in terms of the Board of Regents. I think the other piece that I wanted to make mention of is what you were talking about earlier, Regent Garza, is that the compliance issues that are coming down from the state are putting pressures on the colleges, the deepest internal operations. And what I'm speaking about specifically on the IT side is Texas Administrative Code 202, that is putting all these pressures on the college for compliance and necessity and stuff. And it's restricting the freedoms of the classroom by way of technology. Yeah, it is restricting their academic freedom. You know, a faculty member says, I want to use X platform. I want to do it this way. Well, okay. Anyway, long story short, it's tied back to Tech 202 in terms of how we provide security and all these other things. And it's really causing a lot of consternation. My point is that there's more and more restrictions coming from the legislature that tie into our operations, our very most basic operations, and we need to talk about that. I talked about it and presented on it at a national conference just a few weeks ago with our ERP folks, and our faculty and my colleagues are all talking about this kind of thing, and everybody's nodding, saying, "Yep, it's really affecting us." I was on a panel with people from around the country when we talked about that. So, just heads up, it is so necessary to move ahead and understand, so that the Board of Regents understands the things that we have to do, and therefore the college can move forward together, understanding at least the most basic level what is expected of us, like and how that is increasing on a day-to-day basis, or year-to-year basis anyway, session to session anyway.
Mhm.
Regent Garza, can I say one thing?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Regent Bennett.
I think we, as an organization, we need to stay flexible in view of things that might change dramatically, such as the events going on in IT. We weren't aware of many of those a year ago. So if we had a concrete plan for internal audit that wasn't changeable, we wouldn't be able to address those change situations. So when we have turnover, in the middle of a conversion, I think we need to address that as a board or as a committee of the board as it occurs, because at that time you're really exposed. The organization is really exposed. Middle of a conversion, high level turnover, we've got exposure. What are we going to miss? So we've got Columbia Advisory Group. That's great. We need somebody else to check on all their work. If Columbia Advisory was reporting to the former IT director, that's not an internal audit function. They're reporting to him. So the internal auditors serve an entirely different function. The external auditors serve a dramatically different function. They're not going to catch many problems. They're going to catch high level problems, but they're not going to catch many problems. They've got a different function. These internal auditors, we're relying on them to be our eyes and ears and administration's eyes and ears to make sure that policies are being followed, that big, unusual events aren't occurring without our knowledge. That's just a thought.
If I might add, Ed, what do you recommend as a way to approach the issue you just brought up?
Well, my recommendation is that we look at the money that's being spent and the exposure that's being incurred, two different factors, exposure in IT, money. What's an unusual expenditure that we've had over the last 5 years? Well, it's construction. Our normal expenditures are college operations. We've got that down pretty well. We've got unusual expenditures of over $200 million that we didn't have much experience at. Nobody had much experience at. So that should be looked at, the unusual items, because that's where things are going to fall through the cracks. So let's look at the unusual items. Let's not us look at them. Let's have our internal auditors look at them, because they have experts in all those areas. They've got IT experts, they've got construction experts. That firm, I've looked at their webpage, that firm has a lot of expertise and they can bring it in. We can't hire it. We can't afford to hire it. We can't afford to put somebody on the payroll full-time to do part-time work, but we can pay consultants to do it. And that is money well spent. Yeah, even if we just get the satisfaction that, hey, we're not doing anything wrong, that's still money well spent.
Mr. Garcia, you had the comment? Oh, I'm sorry, Augie, you were first. You had something that you wanted to address?
A
Mr.
couple of
Rivera?
things. Yes, Regent Garza and Scott and Bennett. I should have said this at the outset, but just kind of operating rule for this committee. I think you all are doing fine with it, but unlike other committees, here you're actually going to at some point discuss and deliberate confidential matters. And I want each of you to be sensitive to that. I wasn't too worried about this meeting because it's an organizational meeting and you're talking generally in concepts, but at some point you're going to be receiving information that is going to be clearly confidential that you will have to address in closed session. And we'll properly prepare for that. I mean, I think it won't be something that necessarily just pops up. However, having said that, I mean, I want you to be mindful of, for example, cybersecurity matters for the most part, when you get into the way security is set up or how it's executed, at the college, those are matters that can be discussed in closed session.
Closed session.
Findings, for example, before, like Regent Scott pointed out, I think she nailed it. I mean, you have an oversight function, and you're not doing the audit yourselves. And so you will be reviewing matters that will come to you preliminarily in draft form. And Ms. McDonald will be very sure to put draft confidential for discussion only, and that'll be something you can also discuss in closed session. If there's anything like personnel matter, anything at all that is sensitive, I just want you all to remember, like in a regular board meeting, since this is posted and you're deliberating in general in public right now, be careful with that. And I'll keep my hand on the unmute button to help you all out, because I know you're all operating in good faith and you want to move forward with this work, but just be careful is what I'm saying. The second thing I was going to say was, I think, to remind you that as it's spelled out in your committee charge, your main responsibility will be reviewing the audit functions of the college, performing some oversight, having an opportunity to be involved in that, not actually doing the audit yourselves, but doing it on a calendar that makes sense, because that's going to be key. You're going to have to know when to meet, right, in time to be able to get the information you need before it gets to the entire board. So if we can be thinking about that, and it's sounding to me like you're having a good discussion, you're putting things on the table, but you might have to have another meeting here shortly, okay?
Agreed.
Meeting at least quarterly doesn't mean that you only meet quarterly.
At least.
You know, you meet as often as you need to, and here, as you're just getting started and getting your framework set up and your calendar put down, you know, on you know, you may need to meet again shortly with Dr. Escamilla, you know, having the team present to you guys whatever you want to hear about next. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And thank you for your comments, Counselor.
Sure.
You're here to keep us out of trouble or keep the college from disclosing information that might not be healthy for the general public to have. So thank you. Mr. Garcia.
As I've said before, Regent, got to let you know that the Open Meetings Act requires you to be transparent, and I'm very proud of you all because you adhere to that. But it gives you some exceptions, and I will vigorously defend your right to exercise those exceptions and discuss sensitive matters in closed session, because that's what you're allowed to do. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Mr. Garcia.
Yes, sure. I'm going to piggyback on what Mr. Rivera just said, and then on another note, you know, one of the things that I worry about is talking about our vulnerabilities, right? If the audit finding, the auditors come in and say, hey, you know, here's an audit finding that Raul Garcia does not lock the door in his office, and he's exposing all that bars of gold in the back office, and those lists of bad characters are going to be taking notes and then planning for it, right? So just food for thought. The second piece too is, you know, when we talk about, and I think Mr. Bass touched on this a little bit, is when we talk about the body of work that Weaver does and the environmental changes that have occurred. What has happened in the last 18 months? We've had to transition into a digital type of platform setting in all business services and everything else. And so the risks there scaled up. And so, you know, it brings up the conversation of IT and those operational issues that we're having today. And so, you know, maybe part of the conversation could be when we have this workshop is how flexible can the audit program be, right? So what does that mean? Here we are 5 years dealing with items that of a risk assessment that took place 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? But here is something that really scaled up, and it was the IT controls. Now, don't get me wrong, I think we have a good firm in place today that has helped us navigate through those items, right? But it's one of those things that, you know, hey, if there's some risk that's happening because of changes in our operational environment, then I think there needs to be a conversation around that and the ability or flexibility to make adjustments to the original risk assessment and realign the priorities. Just food for thought.
Agreed. I think flexibility is key. If you've got a list of items that might take you 5 years to achieve, you have to be able to take some of those items off a list and put those that might need more, you know, have higher priority and need immediate attention. So I guess one of the things that I want to think about, first off, we talked about grants.
Excuse me.
Sorry?
Can I
Yes,
clarify something? In
Yes,
our
ma'am.
actual charter for internal audit, there is that flexibility. Anytime, because, you know, since the internal audit reports up, I'm just a liaison, but anytime the board feels like that it should be changed or redirected, the board does have that authority by the charter. So if you feel like at any time attention needs to be moved to a different area, then you can ask the internal auditors to come up with a plan and revise the plan and move it forward for the board to approve. So just to let you know, there is that flexibility.
Okay, I'm just going to speak from my own knowledge experience, right? Is that typically someone, I'm going to say a board member who doesn't know history like I didn't know this morning, and who goes through or sees some audit, internal audit or external audit information, if you haven't had the opportunity to take a deep dive, it's not likely that you're going to come up and you're going to be, I'm going to say, either aggressive or or assertive enough to say, these are the things that I think I'd like added or taken off the audit. And so I think that as an audit committee, I think that it would be beneficial to the college and to the board if we were able to act as at least as a vehicle for being able to consider taking things off or adding things on to an internal or external audit. And that's just my own, that's my own opinion. And I guess certainly not the opinion of the board, but I think the board or possibly the committee. But I think that the more that we make the process amenable to at least possible discussion, open discussion by the entire board, I think the better off the college will be. What are your thoughts, Dr. Escamilla?
So in terms of those processes, I think you're spot on. I mean, I think as I think the sooner the full board, especially this committee, meets more and more as regularly as it can, and the full board at least has the overview of the entire audit processes at the college. I think moving forward, from my experience, just by other board dynamics, that the system that is now in place with the audit committee will work. I think yesterday was a great example with the ad hoc committee for.
I was very impressed with the work that they did and what they brought back
Exactly.
and this discussion that it created. Yes.
Yeah, the ethics ad hoc committee and the like was a perfect example of those things working. They've been briefed at the bigger level, the entire board level, and I think as soon as those dynamics can start functioning and flowing, the information can start flowing back and forth. Tie that back to what Ms. McDonald was saying, in that the board can move at any time and adjust the priorities of Weaver's activities in this case. We're amenable. We're ready for that. It's just I just think there's just a little bit more time that needs the dynamics to develop.
Yeah, we've
Those are my
got
comments.
some homework to do as a committee. We've got some homework to do in order to be able to get to where we can actually make some contributions to the board. Chairman Scott?
I was going to say, our committee charter gives us the ability to review those internal audit reports and responses, but more importantly, to review and approve the internal audit process and governance documents.
Okay.
So we have that charter from the board already. I think we would either in closed session or in open session as appropriate, discuss any of those changes with the full board, since the full board authorized the contract. But if this committee chooses to review and approve that internal audit process and governance documents, our charter gives us that explicit authority.
Okay, good. I mean, I tried to read it and I didn't see it that
Yeah.
way. It gives the opportunity to review the findings, but I didn't see where it actually had us involved in the plan itself or input in the plan. And I think that's, if we can put that in there somewhere, it would make me feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. A couple of things just to kind of go back on. I heard us talk about the grants, and I think we have a great, I'm going to say, manner in which we go out and seek and get grants and continue to qualify for those grants. In the audit plan status yesterday, I saw where there was a request to do some. It was high on their list to do an audit and advisory, and then it was written out as canceled. Can we kind of I'm just questioning as to how that particular action item was canceled. Did we complete something? Did we feel comfortable it was being done? Tammy, go ahead. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yes, sir. The audit was conducted an initial audit was conducted previously, and there was work identified that needed to go forward. At that time, we felt like maybe Weaver could help in an advisory capacity. But when they came back to do their follow-up audit over grants, we actually had engaged some additional assistance on putting our controls and a lot of the pieces together for the grants department. So when Weaver came back and conducted their follow-up audit over grants, there was so much progress, excuse me, so much progress and work had already happened. We felt like it wasn't necessary for them to do the consulting piece, but they did complete the audit piece. It's just there had been, you know, to Mr. Garcia and his teams, I know that we had gotten some extra help and formally developed, you know, some grant procedure. They were very pleased with the progress that was made.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but-
in a case like, I'm sorry, Doctor, go ahead, and then I'll finish my comments.
Oh, well, yeah, I would just add to that, you know, and at that point, and, you know, like Tammy and I were discussing, you know, they'd been here for 5 years, and it was like, well, is it time for a new something? We were thinking, I was thinking it was never really formalized or anything else. We thought, well, is it time to do something else? The other thing too is we were trying to still, and I think we're still in this process, but we were trying to understand the full function of Columbia Advisory Group, really trying to see how they were going to advance us. Because we knew we had the CRP, we knew the conversion, we knew we had other things, and we were really going to focus and really assess what level of work they were going to bring. That being said, you know, we were looking at Weaver, we were kind of looking at ourselves and saying, is it time to change horses? Is it? Well, we don't know yet. So there was a lot of things going on at that point. I'm not saying we should, but like you started off with, is it time for that? We did talk about that at one point. Is it time right now? Would I say that now? No, that was last year from this year, or about a year and a half ago, if I recall correctly, Mr. Bennett. You might remember when exactly. But I guess it was last year this time, or last spring.
It was, and we interviewed 3 firms, wonderful firms.
Yeah. And I wouldn't. I'm just trying to show historically what happened, just to kind of apprise us of. So we were thinking, you know, is that what it is? Are we? So anyway, I just had to add that.
Well, again, Raul, go ahead, Raul, and then I'll come back with my comments. Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
So touching on your question on the grants and the services performed by Weaver, one of the things that what happened in the history of the grant office is that we had some turnover, and we were very fortunate to bring in some very talented individuals, on board some very talented individuals. One of the services that Weaver was looking to do for us as an add-on to the consulting is to help us with our professional development in the grants office. And so I can tell you the talent pool that we brought in, they did a phenomenal job in rolling out what I call an operational type of training, because we can think of training in 2 components. One is the operational, and then the other piece is the technical. From the operational perspective, we took it ourselves and we rolled it out in the midst of the pandemic. We did it online, and I can tell you it was well attended, and I think it was successfully rolled out to talk about our updated policies and procedures for the grant office. And so that's one of the things that we said, you know, we're not going to take you up on that offer. And so it's one of those decisions that sometimes that I like to make only because it saves the colleges money. You know, I could have been paying a consultant to come in, and I don't know what their rates are, but you know, they could be charging me $200 an hour to do some training. Well, you know, is it cost effective? I'm not too sure. It depends on going back to what their value proposition is, right? Our value proposition was that we can do it ourselves, and I think we've done that. But there is a second piece, the technical piece, that I think is just as critical, and I think our office does have a game plan for that, and so we're now looking to Weaver to help us with that piece, but we are definitely planning out a more technical piece. When I say technical, I'm referring to the compliance requirements standards of a specific grant. Typically, our grants are coming in from the U.S. Department of Education. They have their own rules and regulations. And so we need to find an organization that understands the details and the specifics of the U.S. Department of Education's rules, the very detailed requirements of the complexity of each of the federal grants that we get here at Del Mar.
Okay. Just listening to you, Tammy, and the reasons why we took it off, and that's perfectly good. I'm just kind of thinking to myself whether if we developed a kind of a wish list for what the internal or the audit committee would like to see in terms of an internal audit, so that if we pick 3 or 4 items for our consultant or whoever's helping us with that function, where we might want to have projects that we might be able to plug in a case like this, where the grants administration audit is said canceled because we feel so much work has progressed and we're already well ahead of the curve there. We want to make sure that we at least get our dollars worth from an organization or a company like a firm like Weaver, right? By plugging in other things that the audit or the college might find beneficial. What are your thoughts?
Yes, sir. The grants audit was not canceled. The audit happened. It was just a consulting advisory piece that we did. We felt like we didn't need their services because we conducted it and found some help in-house to do those pieces. So the audit happened, and it was a very good follow-up audit, and we was very pleased with the progress that had been made from the first audit to the follow-up audit. So just so we can clarify that the audit happened. It was just an advisory consulting piece that we decided was no longer needed. Because staff had made so much progress between the initial grant and the follow-up grant. Now there is flexibility. I think you can see on the plan that was reviewed yesterday, there is a line that says special projects. And we allocate, right now we have in the budget, which includes travel, but right now we are doing quite a few things virtually. We have $250,000 in the budget for internal audit, and that's what we base the plan off of. And so if they don't do something, it's not paid. It's not like a fee every month. It's per hour.
Okay.
We don't have like a retainer. It's not a fee every month. We pay. If they work, they get paid. So if they don't work, they don't get paid. So that's how the fee schedule set up, sir.
Okay. Thank you for educating me. I didn't know. All right.
You're welcome.
Dr. Scamilla, there's a couple. Well, I guess one of the 2 things that I want to at least get us to take away from this meeting is, I think I'd like us to think about how we would develop a process for being able to put items on an internal audit list, right? Where we're going to get where we might get input from on this particular.
So, I mean, I
being
think,
able to do that.
yeah, I mean, I think from a process standpoint, I think it's, again, I think it's the regents on this committee that generate ideas. Again, we're always around you in support of whatever and however we need to support you. If you want to ask questions and those kinds of things, I think we can do a lot of discovery probably, and we're probably going to have to go into closed session for some of those discussions. Counselor, am I accurate? Based, yeah, okay, so getting no affirmation there. We'll have to take some deep dives and have some real in-depth conversations here. And then I think we go back, I think, we apprise the board and have open discussions to the degree we can, go into closed session there as well. And I think formulating strategies that way to move ahead is a logical process. I mean, that's just using current board dynamics that I've seen work before with us. That being said, what I need to say now is there are going to be things and steps that I have to move on that are going to get ahead of this agenda. I can't go into the details of those things, but there are some things in IT and the like that I think we've talked about before, that I'm gonna be moving on. I'll be glad to apprise you every step of the way and come back to this committee and report as necessary. Individual phone calls as chair, I can let you know how things are proceeding. But as we're speaking, and this morning already, and certainly after yesterday's board meeting, I have to move on certain things to put things in place, given all the changes that Mr. Bennett and others have been alluding to.
Okay.
So from a
Chairman
process,
Scott?
yeah, from a process standpoint, why don't at our next meeting, we look at the calendars for those three audit functions, IT, internal and external. Tammy and Raul can come back to us with, Tammy especially, on the risk assessment calendar. When is that draft? So we'll have an opportunity for input into that draft plan, both the risk assessment as well as in the draft plan for the next 5 years, with plenty of flexibility. And at that point, I think if there are other issues that we see, we think need to be addressed, that would be the opportunity for us to add those, or to ask for those to be added to the list. But I think that calendar potentially for us would be really important to help drive our work, so that we know when input is productive and when input is too late, so that we can make sure that the committee is functioning well. And then we also know when to look at draft reports, when to look at and provide feedback on those draft reports. So I think that would be an important next step for us, is to really understand the calendar for those three audit functions.
I totally agree. The calendar was also on the list to take out from this action items from this meeting. We do need a calendar for the internal audit, the external audit, and of course the a risk assessment related to our IT activities. Just final comments. Dr. Scamillan, your help related to what the state's asking you to do and how that's restricting your freedom in the classroom, or your instructor's freedom in the classroom. We had challenges at the city where you had mandates by either the federal government or the EPA or the state's TCEQ, and then you had no funding to be able to actually be able to address those mandates. And so if they tie all these requirements and start to have that conversation about all these requirements, you should also bring it back to what kind of additional funding they're going to give you in order to be able to meet those requirements or meet those restrictions.
Well,
be able to handle it.
you saw that chart yesterday from 1986.
Yes, I saw that. That's why it's fresh in my mind.
Okay, I'm reading your mind. That's a good and a kind of scary thing, I think. But I think we as long as the board understands that, and as we're moving ahead in budgetary priorities, as we're prioritizing our needs and assessments of our needs, I think we can be as good as we can be. Carol and I spent an inordinate amount of time focused on the things going on, purposely so, in Austin, and that's still a very tough nut to crack. Now, that being said, I don't know what the special session is going to hold in the short term, to see if maybe there's a pivot in our direction for the way of support. So anyway, stay tuned there. We'll bring you the TAC 202. We'll talk about the importance of, I'm sure Columbia Advisory will talk about that. We will talk about it, and those pressures that are being felt there as well. But thanks for bringing that up.
Okay.
Unfunded mandates are alive and well in education as they are in municipal government, Rudy.
I've come to realize that just in my short time on the board. Regent Bennett, any additional comments related to our first meeting, what you think what direction we ought to take in follow-up meetings?
No, I'm comfortable with what we've covered so far. I'm looking at the exposure areas and the unusual areas, and we've covered that. So
Okay.
I'm good with what's happened.
Might I add one more thing?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Regents, you never need to wait for anything. If something pops up in your thoughts and your ideas, and or two of y'all are happen to be meeting about whatever the situation is, or talking about things, don't hesitate to call so that I can get it on the agenda, so I can get it processed, so I can get the information to you as soon as possible. We are open books here, and I do appreciate you all's suggestions and ideas, and how we how we firm up the formalization of our audit structures, and take the deeper dives, and I can see the future. I can see what's going on there. There's going to be 2 points there. One, just call me as soon as possible. Two, even this, even with outsourced support and everything else, we still have to be responsive to it. I think there's going to be some pressures over in the risk assessment area of Keys area. I'm thinking we're going to talk about how to make sure that we have ample staff to just deal with the audit, I'm going to say the more robust auditing function that's probably in front of us, or at least I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing this out there. Get ready. We're going to talk about that. We'll bring that back to you. That's not a problem. We're going to come back with a solution there. But I want you to know that I'm already feeling that sensing that there's going to be a need there in our risk assessment area for resources, and we can take care of that. I'm just letting you know that there may be a little augmentation and change there.
Okay. Any additional closing thoughts before we adjourn this meeting? If not, I'll work with staff and have them set up our next meeting, if that's okay. And then reach out to the regents and the Chairwoman Scott, to be able to make sure that the next meeting date is convenient for everybody involved. Thank you, Dr. Escamilla. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody. Tammy, Raul, everybody. Thank you so much for all your help. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
We're adjourned. Bye-bye.